The Duke swore an oath to his brothers in arms until love forced him to break the only vow that ever mattered. The letter in Catherine Winter's hand trembled as she read the words that would destroy three men who loved each other like brothers, and the Duke of Ravenswood watched her face pale with the understanding that he had chosen her over a sacred promise made in blood and darkness on a battlefield where honor was the only currency that mattered. "I cannot accept this," she whispered. But James Blackwood, whose title meant nothing compared to the brotherhood forged in war, reached across his massive desk and took her cold fingers in his scarred hands, and said the words that would mark him as an oath-breaker for the rest of his life. "You do not have to accept it, Catherine, but you must understand that I would break every vow I ever made, betray every man who ever trusted me, and walk willingly into disgrace if the alternative is watching you marry another man while I stand silent in a church and pretend my heart is not being carved from my chest." Wait, before the next confession unfolds, if this story has already stirred your heart, tell us where you're watching from. To make sure you don't miss the next betrayal, kiss, or redemption, subscribe and join our circle. The next heartbeat might change everything. Now, back to the scene. The letter was from Colonel Marcus Thorne, one of the two men who had dragged James from a burning building in Portugal, who had held him while he screamed through the fever that should have killed him, who had made him promise, made all three of them promise, that they would never let a woman come between them, never let soft peacetime affections destroy what war had forged. "We are brothers unto death," the oath had read, written in James's own hand 7 years ago, when they were younger and harder and believed that nothing could matter more than the men who had saved your life. "No woman, no title, no fortune will divide us. We stand together or not at all." And James had meant it. God help him, he had meant every word. Until Catherine Winters arrived at Ravenswood Manor as his widowed sister's companion, and he discovered that some promises, no matter how sacred, could not survive the reality of loving someone with every broken piece of yourself. "James," Catherine said, and the way she spoke his name, not "Your Grace," not even "My Lord," but simply "James," with all the tenderness and terror he felt reflected in her voice, nearly undid him. "Marcus writes that you have betrayed the oath, that you declared your intentions toward me at Lord Pemberton's dinner party last week, that you have—" she looked down at the letter, her eyes filling with tears, "that you have chosen love over brotherhood, and that he and William can no longer stand beside a man who values his own heart above the promises that kept them all alive when honor was all they had left." James stood and moved around the desk, but did not touch her again, not yet, not while she was still trying to understand the magnitude of what he had done. "I did not declare my intentions lightly, Catherine. I fought against this for months. I tried to ignore what I felt. I tried to convince myself that the oath mattered more than—" "The oath does matter more," she interrupted, her voice breaking. "James, these men saved your life. You told me about Portugal, about the building collapse, about how Marcus pulled you from the flames while William held off the French soldiers long enough for you both to escape. You said you owed them everything." "I do owe them everything," he said quietly. "And I am repaying that debt by becoming the worst kind of man, an oath-breaker, a betrayer of brothers, someone who puts his own desires above sacred promises." "But Catherine, I would rather be that man and have the chance to love you than be an honorable man who watches you slip away because I was too afraid to break a vow I made when I did not know you existed." She stared at him, and he saw the war being waged behind her eyes, the same war he had fought and lost. Catherine Winters was not a woman who took other sacrifices lightly. She had been married at 18 to a cruel man twice her age, had endured 5 years of humiliation and worse before his death had freed her, and had only recently begun to believe she might deserve happiness. The knowledge that James was destroying lifelong friendships for her was agony written across her beautiful, haunted face. "You must tell me why," she said finally. "Marcus writes that the oath was made for a reason, that all 3 of you had seen what happens when soldiers return home and let women destroy the bonds that kept them alive. You must tell me what happened, James. I need to understand what you are breaking and why you believe I am worth it." So James told her. He told her about the war, not the glorious parts that civilians wanted to hear, but the truth of it, the mud and blood and endless fear. The way you learned to love the men beside you with an intensity that made ordinary affection seem pale, because they were the only thing standing between you and death, and you were the same for them. He told her about the night Marcus's younger brother, William Thorne, arrived at 19, terrified and trying to hide it, and how Marcus had begged James to keep the boy safe because their mother had already lost 2 sons to the war and could not bear to lose another. He told her about the friendship that had formed between the 3 of them, James, Marcus, and young William, and how they had become a unit within the larger regiment, trusting each other absolutely because they had proven in battle after battle that they would die before they let the others fall. And then he told her about Lieutenant Harrison. "Andrew Harrison was our friend," James said, staring out the window at the late autumn rain. "He had a wife back in England, Charlotte, her name was. Beautiful from everything he said. He talked about her constantly, showed us her miniature portrait, read us passages from her letters. And when the war ended and we all came home, Andrew invited us to meet her." Catherine was very still, and James knew she could sense where this was going. "Charlotte was beautiful," he continued. "She was also desperately unhappy in her marriage. Andrew had changed during the war, what man doesn't, and she found him difficult, cold, unable to adjust to peacetime. She confided in Marcus, who was more charming than the rest of us, better at talking to women. He tried to help them reconcile. But Charlotte," James' voice hardened, "Charlotte decided she wanted Marcus instead of her husband. She pursued him relentlessly, manufactured opportunities to be alone with him, told Andrew that Marcus had encouraged her affections." "Had he?" Catherine asked quietly. "No," James said flatly. "Marcus was trying to save their marriage. But Andrew believed his wife. The betrayal destroyed him. He challenged Marcus to a duel, and Marcus, God help him, Marcus could not bring himself to kill a friend, so he deliberately missed his shot. Andrew did not miss." Catherine gasped. "He killed Marcus?" "No, Marcus survived, barely. But Andrew's shot was close enough to prove intent, and the scandal ruined them both. Charlotte left Andrew, married a merchant, and moved to America. Andrew was ostracized by society for dueling and for his wife's public infidelity." "And Marcus?" James' hands clenched. "Marcus lost everything. His reputation, his social standing, the woman he had actually loved who refused to marry a man touched by such scandal. What happened to Andrew?" "He ate his pistol 6 months later," James said bluntly, and Catherine flinched. "Left a note saying he could not live in a world where the men you trust betray you and the women you love destroy you." William found the body. The rain beat against the windows while Catherine absorbed this. Finally, she said, "And that is when you made the oath." "That is when we made the oath," James confirmed. "The 3 of us, in my study at Ravenswood, the same room we are in now, with Andrew's blood barely cold. We swore that we would never let a woman come between us. that we would never marry unless all three approve of the match, that we would never, ever allow romantic love to threaten the bonds that had kept us alive when nothing else would. We wrote it out formally, signed it in our own blood. Melodramatic, I know, but we were grieving and angry and terrified of becoming Andrew, of losing each other to peacetime's softer betrayals after surviving war's honest violence. "And you have kept that oath?" Catherine asked. "For 7 years?" "For 7 years," James agreed. "Marcus has refused 3 women who wanted to marry him. William turned down a substantial fortune because he could not get Marcus and me to approve the girl. And I," he turned to face her, "I have sent away every matchmaking mama, refused every introduction, told myself I did not need a wife because I had my brothers, and that was enough. Until you." Catherine's eyes were swimming with unshed tears. "James, I cannot be the reason you lose them. I cannot." "You are not the reason," he said fiercely, crossing to her and taking her hands despite her resistance. "Catherine, listen to me. The oath was born out of fear and grief, and for years it served its purpose. It protected us from the wrong women, from the Charlotte Harrisons who would have destroyed us. But it has become a prison. Marcus is 36 and alone. William is 28 and pretending he does not want a family. And I?" He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I am 34 years old, and I have been half-allied since the war ended, going through the motions of being a duke while feeling nothing, connecting with no one. Until you walked into my sister's drawing room 6 months ago, and I remembered what it felt like to want something beyond survival." "What if you regret this?" she whispered. "What if in a year, or 5 years, or 10, you look at me and remember what you gave up, and you hate me for it?" "Impossible," he said simply. "Catherine, I watched you comfort my sister through her grief. I have seen you gentle with servants, fierce with my steward when he tried to cheat the tenant farmers, patient with the village children you teach to read. I have talked with you about books, politics, estate management, philosophy. Every conversation we have had has been a revelation because you see the world with such clarity and courage despite everything you have survived. I have fallen in love with who you are, not some image of who I want you to be. That is not something I will regret." "But Marcus and William are wrong," James said, and he heard the steel in his own voice. "They are wrong to demand I sacrifice the possibility of real happiness to maintain an oath made in grief. They are wrong to believe that loving you means I love them less. And they are wrong to think that the brotherhood that matters can be destroyed by something as fundamental as one of us finally finding a person who makes life worth living instead of merely enduring." Catherine was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "I love you," she said brokenly. "I have loved you almost from the beginning, but I thought, I am a widow, James, and not even a respectable one. My first marriage was a disaster. I brought nothing to it but poverty and hope, and I left it with nothing but relief that he died before he killed me. I am 26 years old with no fortune, no connections, no prospects. Why would a duke want me? Why would any man want me, let alone willing to destroy lifelong friendships for the chance to—" He kissed her, cutting off the self-recrimination that he had heard too many times, that broke his heart every time she spoke, as if her worth was measured in dowries and bloodlines, rather than the fierce intelligence and wounded courage that made her extraordinary. She kissed him back desperately, her hands fisting in his coat, and he poured 7 years of loneliness and 6 months of denying what he felt into the contact. When they finally broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I want you because you are Catherine Winters, brilliant, brave, scarred by cruelty but not broken by it. I want you because every conversation we have makes me think harder. I want you because you make me laugh, which I had forgotten how to do. I want you because when I imagine my future now, you are in every scene, and the versions without you feel gray and empty and wrong. Even if it costs you Marcus and William? Even then, he said, though the words hurt to speak. I love them. They are my brothers in every way that matters. But Catherine, they are asking me to give up the possibility of real love, of partnership, of children, of growing old with someone who understands me, because they are afraid. And I cannot live my life governed by someone else's fear, even if that someone saved my life. Catherine pulled back enough to look at him, really look at him, and he let her see everything. The love, yes, but also the grief and the guilt and the fear that he was making the wrong choice, that he would regret this, that he was betraying the men who had been more than brothers. "Tell me what happened at Lord Pemberton's dinner party," she said. "Marcus's letter says you declared your intentions publicly. What exactly did you say?" James winced. "Pemberton was in his cups and making increasingly inappropriate comments about you, suggesting that as a widow you must be amenable to certain arrangements. I told him that you were under my protection, that I intended to court you formally, and that if he spoke about you that way again, I would call him out, regardless of his age." Oh, James. It gets worse. Marcus was there. William, too. They pulled me aside after dinner, reminded me of the oath, demanded I retract my statement. I refused. Marcus said that if I chose you over the Brotherhood, he would never speak to me again. James's voice caught. William begged me not to do this, said that Andrew's ghost was already haunting him, that he could not lose another brother to a woman's influence. And I told them both that I loved them, but I loved you more, and that I was going to court you whether they approved or not. And they left. They left, James confirmed, walked out of Pemberton's house and have not answered any of my letters since. Marcus wrote to you instead, I assume, hoping you would break off our, whatever this is, before it goes any further. Catherine looked down at the letter still clutched in her hand. He writes that I am repeating Charlotte Harrison's pattern, that I am seducing you away from your brothers out of calculated desire for a title and fortune, that I am manipulating you with tears and vulnerability, and that when I have secured my position, I will discard you as she discarded Andrew. He is wrong, James said immediately. He is judging you based on one woman's betrayal years ago. But what if he is not entirely wrong? Catherine interrupted. James, I am not manipulating you deliberately, but I am. I have encouraged this. I have spent time with you, talked with you, allowed myself to hope when I should have maintained proper distance. I knew about the oath. You told me about it months ago. Told me that you and Marcus and William were committed to remaining bachelors to preserve your friendship. And yet I have continued to be yourself, James finished. Catherine, you have not seduced me. You have simply existed in my vicinity, while being intelligent, kind, and brave. And I have fallen in love with you because of who you are, not because of anything you calculated or manipulated. Marcus is seeing Charlotte's ghost where it does not exist. Then make him see the truth, Catherine said urgently. James, if I am not Charlotte, if this is real between us, then you must make Marcus and William understand that. You cannot simply break the oath and walk away. You owe them more than that. I have tried. Try harder, she said, and there was the fierce woman he loved, the one who would not let him take the easy path. Write to them. Invite them here. Make them see who I actually am, instead of who they fear I might be. Because, James, I will not marry you. I cannot marry you, if it means you lose the men who saved your life. I cannot build my happiness on the ashes of your brotherhood. I will not another Charlotte Harrison, the woman who destroyed friendships and drove a good man to suicide. You are nothing like her, James insisted. Then prove it, Catherine challenged, to them, to yourself. Show them that love does not have to destroy brotherhood, that I am not the enemy they think I am. And if they still refuse to accept this after meeting me, after understanding what we have together, then, she took a shaky breath, then we will decide what comes next. But James, you must try. For them, yes, but also for yourself. Because if you marry me while believing you have betrayed your brothers, that guilt will poison everything between us eventually. She was right. God help him. She was right. James had been so focused on claiming Catherine, on refusing to let the oath dictate his life, that he had not considered what it would cost them both if the guilt and grief festered. I will write to them, he said, tonight. I will invite them to Ravenswood, ask them to meet you properly, to give us, a chance to prove that this is not betrayal, but growth. But Catherine, if they refuse to come, if they cannot see past their fear, then we will face that together, she said. But we must try first. So James wrote the letters that night, sitting in his study with Catherine beside him, helping him find the right words. He wrote to Marcus first, the harder of the two to convince. Marcus, you saved my life in Portugal. You pulled me from that building while flames consumed everything around us, and you did it knowing you might die in the process. I owe you more than I can ever repay. But I cannot repay that debt by living half a life to ease your fears. I love Catherine Winters, not because she resembles Charlotte Harrison, she does not, but because she is brave and intelligent and kind despite every reason she has to be bitter and broken. I love her because she makes me want to be better than I am. I love her because for the first time since the war ended, I feel fully alive. You fear I am repeating Andrew's mistakes. I understand that fear. But Marcus, Andrew's tragedy was not that he loved. It was that he loved the wrong woman, a woman who used his affection as a weapon. Catherine is not Charlotte. She has not pursued me. I have pursued her. She has not manipulated me. She has challenged me. And when I told her about the oath, her first instinct was to walk away rather than come between us. Come to Ravenswood. Meet her properly. Talk to her without presuming she is your enemy. Give us the chance to prove that love does not have to destroy brotherhood, that it can, in fact, deepen it by reminding us all that there are things worth living for beyond survival. I am not breaking the oath lightly. I am breaking it because I believe it has become a prison that will destroy us more surely than any woman could. We made it out of grief and fear, and it has served its purpose. But we are not those scared, angry men anymore. We are allowed to grow. We are allowed to want more than the half-life we have been living. Please come. Please give us a chance. And if, after meeting Catherine, you still believe I am betraying you, then I will accept your judgment, but I will not accept it based on a ghost from 7 years ago. Your brother, always, James. The letter to William was shorter, but no less heartfelt, acknowledging his younger friend's particular pain. He had been the one to find Andrew's body, had carried that trauma for years, while still asking for the chance to prove that this was different. They sent the letters by express courier, and then they waited. Marcus's response arrived 3 days later. I will come. I will meet her. But I am not promising anything except that I will listen. Do not mistake my presence for approval. William's letter came the next day. Marcus says we must give you a chance. I am not convinced, but I am coming because I owe you enough to at least look you in the eye when I tell you that you are making a mistake. They are coming, James told Catherine, finding her in the library where she spent most afternoons teaching his sister's children to read. Both of them, next week. Catherine went pale but nodded. Then, I have 1 week to prepare to meet the men whose lives I am supposedly destroying. You are not. I know what I am and am not doing, she interrupted gently, but they do not know that yet. And James, I understand their fear. I would be afraid too, if I had watched what they watched, if I had made the promises they made. I do not blame them for their suspicion. I simply hope to prove it unfounded. The week passed in a blur of preparation and anxiety. Catherine insisted on continuing her normal routines, teaching the village children, managing the household accounts, helping James's sister with her correspondence, because she wanted Marcus and William to see who she actually was, not some performance designed to win their approval. James watched her and fell more in love every day, which only increased his dread of the coming confrontation. What if Catherine was wrong? What if Marcus and William could not see past their fear? What if he was forced to choose definitively between the woman he loved and the brothers who had saved his life? He was standing at the window of his study, staring at nothing, when his butler announced, "Colonel Marcus Thorne and Mr. William Thorne, Your Grace." James turned to find them in the doorway. Marcus still military straight despite being in civilian clothes. His dark hair shot through with gray at the temples, his face harder than it had been even during the war. And William, taller now at 28 than he had been at 19, still carrying the shadows of trauma behind his eyes, but hiding it better than he used to. His brothers, the men who had saved his life, who had dragged him from flames and held him through fever, and made him promise to survive when death would have been easier. "Thank you for coming," James said, and his voice was rougher than he intended. "We came because we owe you a conversation before we sever ties completely," Marcus said, his tone clipped and formal. "Where is she?" "In the library. But Marcus, before you meet her, I need you to understand." "I understand that you have broken an oath made in blood," Marcus interrupted. "I understand that you have chosen a woman over your brothers. I understand that you are repeating the exact pattern that killed Andrew Harrison. What else is there to understand?" James felt his temper rise, the same temper that had gotten him into trouble during the war, that Marcus had always been able to diffuse with logic, or William with humor. But there was no diffusing this, no humor to soften it. "You understand nothing," James said flatly. "You understand what you fear, which is not the same as understanding what is actually happening. And if you cannot separate Charlotte Harrison's ghost from Catherine Winter's reality, then you have already lost me, not because of her, but because of your own inability to see past your trauma." Marcus's jaw clenched, and for a moment James thought he might actually swing. But William stepped between them, his hands raised placatingly. "Stop," William said, and his voice held the authority of someone who had learned to navigate between stronger personalities. "Both of you stop. Marcus, we agreed to meet her. We agreed to listen. And James, attacking Marcus before he has even met Catherine is not going to help your case." He was right. James forced himself to breathe, to unclench his fists. "I am sorry. You are right. Come, meet her, and then we will talk, all of us." He led them to the library, where Catherine sat at the large table with several of the tenant children, helping them sound out words from a primer. She looked up when they entered, and James saw her register Marcus and William immediately, saw the flash of fear cross her face before she mastered it, and stood, sending the children away with gentle efficiency. Then she turned to face them, and James watched his brothers see her properly for the first time. Not the specter they had built in their minds, but the real woman, slender, dark-haired, plainly dressed, with eyes that were too old for her 26 years, but still held warmth despite everything she had survived. "Colonel Thorne," she said, curtsying to Marcus, "Mr. Thorne, thank you for coming. I know this cannot be easy for you." Marcus studied her with the same intensity he had once used to assess enemy positions. "Miss Winters." "Mrs. Winters, actually," she corrected quietly. "I am a widow, though I suspect you already knew that." "I knew," Marcus confirmed. "I also know that your first husband was 20 years your senior, that the marriage was arranged by your father to pay off gambling debts, and that you left him nothing in your will, which suggests the union was not happy." Catherine did not flinch from the assessment. "My husband was a cruel man who enjoyed inflicting pain on those weaker than himself. I survived him through determination and luck, and yes, I was relieved when he died. Does that make me the sort of woman who would manipulate James out of calculated desire for a better position?" Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting such directness. William made a small sound that might have been surprise. "I do not know yet," Marcus said slowly. "That is why I am here, to determine whether you are genuinely in love with James or whether you are simply skilled at pretending." "Fair enough," Catherine said, and gestured to the chairs around the table. "Then let us sit and have an honest conversation. But I have a condition." "You are not in a position to set conditions," Marcus said, his tone cooling. "Neither are you," Catherine shot back, and James felt a surge of pride at her refusal to be intimidated. "You are here as James's guests, and as such you will speak to me with the same courtesy I am extending to you. I understand your concerns, I understand your history. But I will not be interrogated like a criminal simply because I have fallen in love with a man whose friends believe he belongs to them." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "James belongs to himself, but his promises belong to us." "Then perhaps the problem is the promise, not the woman," Catherine said, and the words fell like stones into still water. The room went silent. James wanted to intervene, to soften the confrontation, but something told him to let Catherine handle this, that she understood what Marcus and William needed in a way he did not. "Explain," Marcus said finally, and his tone was dangerous. Catherine sat and folded her hands on the table. "You made an oath 7 years ago, after your friend Lieutenant Harrison killed himself. You promised each other that no woman would come between you, that you would never marry without unanimous approval, that romantic love was a threat to be guarded against. And I understand why. What you witnessed with Charlotte Harrison was traumatic and terrifying. But Colonel Thorne, with respect, you have turned that oath into a cage. A cage that has kept us alive," Marcus said. "A cage that has kept you isolated," Catherine corrected. "James has told me about his life since returning from the war. He has told me that he feels disconnected, hollow, going through the motions of being a duke while feeling nothing. William still has nightmares about finding Andrew's body, still blames himself for not seeing the signs. And you," she looked directly at Marcus, "you have refused 3 women who genuinely loved you because you were afraid to risk the vulnerability that love requires. How is that living, Colonel? How is that better than what Andrew suffered?" "Andrew died," Marcus said flatly. "Andrew died because he loved the wrong woman and had no support system beyond his pride," Catherine shot back. "He died because his wife betrayed him, yes, but also because he was too ashamed to ask for help, too proud to admit he was breaking." And instead of learning that the problem was isolation and poor judgment about Charlotte specifically, you 3 decided the problem was love itself. You decided to protect yourselves by cutting off the possibility of connection, and you have been slowly suffocating ever since." William was staring at her with something like wonder. Marcus' face was unreadable. "You do not know us," Marcus said, but his voice had lost some of its certainty. "I know what James has told me, Catherine said. "I know that he spent 5 years after the war managing his estates with ruthless efficiency while feeling nothing, connecting with no one. I know that he has nightmares about Portugal but will not speak about them to anyone except me because he does not want to burden you with his weakness. I know that he has been desperately lonely while surrounded by people, and that the oath you made to protect each other has instead trapped you all in half-lives where survival is enough and happiness is suspect." She leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "I understand why you fear me. You fear I will be another Charlotte, that I will destroy James the way she destroyed Andrew. But Colonel Thorne, I am not asking James to choose between you and me. I am asking you to stop forcing him to make that choice. I am asking you to consider that perhaps love does not have to destroy brotherhood, that it can coexist with it, that a wife is not a threat to friendship unless you make her one." Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then, "Charlotte said something similar. She told us we were being unreasonable, that Andrew could love both her and us. She said we were jealous of her place in his life. And then she destroyed him." "Charlotte was lying," Catherine said bluntly. "I am not. And if you cannot tell the difference between a woman who manipulates and a woman who challenges, then you have given Charlotte more power over your life than she ever deserved." William laughed, a startled, almost helpless sound. "My God, James, she is fierce." "I told you, James," said, relief flooding through him. Catherine was doing what he could not, forcing Marcus and William to confront not just their fear of her specifically, but their fear of vulnerability in general. Marcus stood abruptly and walked to the window, his back to them all. The silence stretched until James thought it might break something. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice low. "Andrew asked me to help him save his marriage. He trusted me, and Charlotte used that trust to pursue me, to manufacture situations where it looked like I was encouraging her. When Andrew found out, when he challenged me to that duel, he believed I had betrayed him with his wife. And even though it was not true, even though I had done nothing wrong, the fact remained that my presence in their lives had contributed to his destruction. How do I—" His voice cracked. "How do I risk that again? How do I watch James fall in love, build a life with someone, and not fear that I am watching Andrew happen all over again?" Catherine stood and crossed to Marcus, moving slowly as if approaching a wounded animal. "You honor Andrew by learning from his death, not by letting it control your life. You honor him by understanding that the problem was not love itself. It was Charlotte's cruelty and Andrew's inability to ask for help. And you honor him by letting James be happy, instead of forcing him to carry the burden of your guilt." Marcus turned to look at her, and James saw tears on his brother's face. The first time he had seen Marcus cry since the day they buried Andrew. "I cannot lose another brother," Marcus said hoarsely. "William and James are all I have. The oath has kept us together. If I let it go, if I let James marry you, what is to stop us from drifting apart? What is to stop the same patterns from—" "Nothing is stopping those patterns except your willingness to fight them," Catherine interrupted gently. "The oath did not keep you together, Colonel. Love kept you together, the love you have for each other as brothers. And that love is strong enough to survive James having a wife, but only if you choose to let it survive. Only if you stop treating marriage as the enemy and start treating it as what it should be, an expansion of family, not a replacement for it." William joined them at the window, placing a hand on Marcus' shoulder. "She is right, you know. I have been thinking it for months but was too afraid to say it. The oath has kept us together, yes, but it has also kept us frozen. And James—" He turned to look at his oldest friend. "James has been miserable. I can see it every time we meet. He is alive, but he is not living. And if Catherine makes him live again, if she makes him happy, then maybe we should be grateful instead of threatened. Marcus looked between them. William, James, Catherine, and something in his expression shifted. The hardness did not disappear entirely, but it softened, like ice beginning to thaw. "I need to understand something," he said, looking at Catherine. "Why James? There are dozens of men in London who would court a widow, men without complicated oaths and traumatized friends. Why choose the hardest possible path?" "I did not choose it," Catherine said simply. "I fell into it. I came to Ravenswood to be a companion to James' sister, fully intending to live quietly and never remarry. And then I met James, and I discovered that he was intelligent and kind and desperately lonely beneath all that ducal dignity. We talked about books, about philosophy, about estate management. We became friends first, and friendship became something more before I even realized it was happening." She smiled, sad and honest. "I tried to walk away when James told me about the oath. I tried to tell him that I was not worth destroying his brotherhood. But he refused to let me go, and I have spent 6 years surviving Colonel Thorne. 6 years enduring a marriage to a man who enjoyed hurting me, and then 3 years existing in the aftermath, too afraid to hope for anything better. And then James looked at me as if I was something precious, and I decided that maybe, just maybe, I deserved to be happy, even if it was difficult, even if it required sacrifice." Marcus studied her for another long moment. Then he turned to James. "Do you love her?" "With everything I am," James said without hesitation. "And you believe she loves you?" "I know she does." "How do you know?" Marcus pressed. "How do you know she is not just an excellent actress, that she is—" "Because she tried to leave," James said. "When I told her about the oath, when she understood what it would cost me to court her, her first instinct was to walk away, to protect me from that cost. Does that sound like Charlotte Harrison to you?" Marcus was silent. Then, slowly, he shook his head. "No, it does not." The tension in the room shifted, not disappearing, but transforming into something less brittle. William exhaled shakily, and Catherine closed her eyes briefly in relief. "I am not giving you my blessing," Marcus said, but his tone had lost its edge. "I am not saying this is a good idea or that I am happy about it, but I am saying I am willing to try. I am willing to see if this can work without destroying everything we built." "That is all I ask," James said, moving to stand beside Catherine, taking her hand in his. "That is all we ask, the chance to prove that love and brotherhood can coexist." William smiled, the expression tentative but genuine. "I think Andrew would have wanted that. I think if he had lived, if he had healed from what Charlotte did to him, he would have wanted us to be happy." "Not just surviving, but actually happy." "Perhaps," Marcus allowed, "but we will never know, will we?" "No," Catherine said quietly, "but you can honor his memory by refusing to let his tragedy define the rest of your lives. You can honor him by being brave enough to live fully instead of existing cautiously." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, and James saw his brother's assessment shifting, not to complete trust, not yet, but to the possibility of trust. The willingness to see Catherine as a person rather than a threat. "Stay for dinner," James said, seizing the opening. "Both of you. Stay for several days, actually. Get to know Catherine properly. See us together. And then decide whether this is truly the betrayal you fear or simply the evolution of who we are." Marcus exchanged a glance with William, some silent communication passing between them. Then William nodded, and Marcus sighed, a sound of exhausted surrender. "We will stay," Marcus said. "1 week. And if at the end of that week I still believe you are making a catastrophic mistake, I will tell you so. But I will tell you honestly, after actually observing you together, not based on assumptions and fear." "That is all I can ask," James said. And the relief that flooded through him was so intense it was almost painful. The week that followed was strange and tentative and occasionally painful, but it was also revelatory. Marcus and William stayed at Ravenswood, and Catherine made no effort to perform for them. She continued teaching the village children, managing household accounts, arguing with James about philosophy over dinner, and generally being herself, which was, James had come to understand, her greatest weapon against suspicion. Marcus watched her like a hawk at first, clearly looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. But Catherine simply treated him with the same warm courtesy she extended to everyone, never pushing for approval, but never hiding who she was either. On the 3rd day, Marcus found her in the estate office, reviewing the tenant accounts with James Stewart. He lingered in the doorway, listening to her efficiently identify a discrepancy in the grain records and propose a solution that would benefit both the estate and the farmers. "You actually understand estate management," he said when she finished, his tone surprised. Catherine looked up with a slight smile. "My father was a gentleman farmer before he lost everything to gambling. I learned young how to read accounts and manage resources. It proved useful after my marriage. My husband had no interest in managing his properties, so I did it for him. Without acknowledgement or authority, of course, but I did it nonetheless. And now? Now, James asks my opinion on estate matters and actually implements my suggestions," she said. "It is a novel experience, being valued for my mind rather than just tolerated for my presence." Marcus nodded slowly. "He has been happier these past months. I noticed, but told myself I was imagining it." "You were not imagining it," Catherine said. "James is happiest when he is intellectually engaged and when he feels genuinely connected to someone. I try to provide both." "And what do you get in return?" Marcus asked, and there was still wariness in the question, but also genuine curiosity. Catherine considered this. "Safety, partnership, the chance to be myself without fear. My first marriage taught me to be invisible, to anticipate violence and avoid it through constant vigilance. James teaches me that I do not have to disappear to be safe, that I can have opinions, take up space, challenge him when I disagree, and he will love me more for it, not less." She looked directly at Marcus. "I know you fear I am using him for his title or his money, but Colonel, I have lived with a title and money before, and they meant nothing when I was married to a man who enjoyed my suffering. What James offers me is not the dukedom, it is the chance to be a full person again, to matter to someone who sees me clearly and values what he sees. That is worth infinitely more than any title." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, "What happened to your husband? James said he died, but not how." "He fell from his horse while drunk," Catherine said evenly. "Broke his neck. I was 23 and felt nothing but relief, which probably makes me a terrible person by society standards. But I will not pretend to mourn a man who left bruises on me weekly and told me I was worthless so often I almost believed it." "You are not worthless," Marcus said, and the sudden vehemence in his tone surprised them both. "And any man who told you that was a fool. I have watched you this week, Mrs. Winters, and you are extraordinary. James is not wrong about that." Catherine's eyes widened. "Thank you, Colonel. That means more than you know." Marcus left the office looking thoughtful, and that night at dinner he was noticeably less hostile. He even smiled once when Catherine made a wry observation about Lord Pemberton's terrible fashion sense, and William laughed so hard he choked on his wine. By the 5th day, the atmosphere had shifted entirely. Marcus and William began to relax, to engage with Catherine as a person rather than a threat, and the old camaraderie between the three men started to resurface, but different now, expanded to include Catherine rather than excluding her. James found William in the garden one afternoon, staring at nothing. "Are you well?" James asked. William turned to him with a strange expression. "I am realizing that I have been wrong. About the oath, about Catherine, about—" He gestured helplessly. "All of it. I have been so afraid of losing you and Marcus that I have been holding on so tightly I was strangling us all. And Catherine is not the threat I thought she was. She is, James, she is good for you. I can see it." "You are more yourself with her than I have seen you since before the war. I tried to tell you." "I know," William interrupted, "but I needed to see it. And now I have, and I am happy for you, James, truly, and I am sorry I made you fight for this so hard." James embraced his friend, feeling years of tension finally dissolve. "You are my brother, William. You are allowed to be afraid. You are allowed to need proof. But thank you for being willing to see the truth once it was in front of you." On the final evening of their stay, Marcus asked to speak with James and Catherine together. They met in the library, where this had all begun, and Marcus looked between them with an expression James could not quite read. "I owe you both an apology," Marcus said without preamble. "I came here believing I was protecting James from another tragedy. I came here convinced that Catherine was another Charlotte Harrison and that I could prevent disaster by forcing James to honor the oath. And I was wrong." He looked at Catherine. "You are not Charlotte. You are not using James. And the oath? The oath was a prison built out of grief, and I have been holding the keys without realizing that I was trapping us all inside. I am sorry for that. And I am sorry for making you both fight so hard to prove something that should have been obvious from the beginning." Catherine's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you, Colonel. That means everything." Marcus managed a small smile. "Call me Marcus, please. If you are going to marry my brother, I suppose we should be on familiar terms." "Does that mean—" James started, hardly daring to hope. "It means I am releasing you from the oath," Marcus said. "I am telling you that you are free to marry Catherine with my blessing. Not my resignation, but my actual blessing. Because William was right. Andrew would have wanted us to be happy." And trying to honor his memory by refusing to live fully is not honor at all. It is just another kind of death. James felt something break open in his chest, relief and joy, and a grief he had been carrying for 7 years finally finding release. He crossed to Marcus and embraced him, and Marcus held him tightly. And for a moment, they were young again, brothers forged in fire and blood who had survived when so many had not. "Thank you," James said roughly. "Thank you for being brave enough to change your mind." "Thank you for being brave enough to break the oath in the first place," Marcus countered. "You were right. The oath had become a cage. And Catherine?" He pulled back to look at her. "Thank you for not giving up on us, for believing we were worth saving, even when we were determined to destroy James's happiness out of fear." "You were always worth saving," Catherine said. "All 3 of you. You just needed someone outside the oath to remind you that surviving is not the same as living." William raised his glass. "To living, then, to Catherine and James, to the end of the oath and the beginning of something better." They drank, and for the first time in 7 years, James felt truly free. The wedding took place 3 months later in Ravenswood's chapel, attended by everyone who mattered. Marcus and William standing as James's groomsmen, James's sister weeping happy tears, the village children Catherine had been teaching presenting her with wildflower bouquets. It was small and intimate and perfect, And when James slipped the ring onto Catherine's finger, he saw Marcus smile, genuinely, warmly, without reservation. The breakfast afterward was held at Ravenswood Manor, and James watched Catherine move through the room with grace and confidence, no longer the frightened widow who had arrived as his sister's companion, but a woman who knew her own worth and had fought to claim her happiness. Marcus approached him as the party was winding down. "She is good for you," he said quietly. "I see it now, how she challenges you, how she makes you think harder and feel more deeply. You were right to fight for her." "I was terrified I would lose you," James admitted. "Both of you." "You could never lose us," Marcus said firmly. "The oath was my fear talking, my inability to trust that we were strong enough to survive change. But we are. We are strong enough to be brothers and to let you have a wife. We are strong enough to expand our family instead of guarding it so jealously that we suffocate ourselves." "Thank you," James said, "for seeing that, for coming around." Marcus smiled. "Thank you for breaking the oath when I was too afraid to do it myself. You saved us all, James. You and Catherine together, you reminded us what it means to be alive." William joined them, slightly drunk and very happy. "To the end of the oath," he declared, raising his glass, "and to the beginning of the rest of our lives, all of us." They drank, three brothers who had survived war and grief and their own worst impulses, who had nearly destroyed themselves trying to prevent loss, and had learned instead that love does not diminish brotherhood, it deepens it. And Catherine, watching from across the room, smiled and knew that she had not destroyed anything. She had simply helped them all remember what they were fighting to survive for in the first place. Years later, when James and Catherine's first son was born, they named him Andrew, a tribute to the friend whose tragedy had nearly prevented their happiness, but whose memory, properly honored, had ultimately taught them all what it meant to live fully instead of merely surviving. Marcus held the baby with tears in his eyes and said, "He would have liked this. He would have wanted us to remember him with joy, not fear." And Catherine, watching the three brothers, four now if you counted little Andrew, gathered around her son, felt the rightness of it settle into her bones. They had honored the oath by breaking it. They had preserved brotherhood by letting it grow. And they had turned tragedy into wisdom by learning that love does not destroy what matters, fear does. So they loved fearlessly, all of them, and built lives worth living in the shadow of the promises they had made and the courage it took to let them go.